Mesdames et messieurs, bienvenue à une conversation importante et angoissée. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to introduce a timely discussion about an important but agonizing subject, the war in Gaza, its geopolitical security and ethical implications, why it's important for conservatives to understand, and what our movement can do to help. We will hear from the perspective of a special guest, Naftali Bennett, an Israeli who participated prominently in his country's military, political, and business history. Israel's survival and often amazing success is not due to the luck of geography or geology, which Canada too often takes for granted. Rather, it is attributable to its leaders and the extraordinary contribution of its citizens to the military, science, technology, business, the arts, and practically every field of human endeavor. These achievements are all the more remarkable given where it started, with a dream, an indigenous Jewish community in a tiny, underdeveloped land, bolstered by traumatized survivors of the Holocaust and other immigrants from around the world, and surrounded by enemies determined to wipe it off the face of the earth. Much has changed since 1948, but the implacable hostility of enemies remains a constant, as does its determination to persevere and prosper as a homeland for the Jewish people. Tragically, we are now living through another terrible challenge. On October 7, a promising breakthrough with its Arab neighbors was shattered by the mass murder, torture, rape, and kidnapping of men, women, children, and even infants. Then, only days after the horrific onslaught, an impossible double standard was imposed on Israel by hypocritical countries indifferent to its fate or hostile to its survival. Yet they give a free pass to a genocidal death cult that sacrifices its own people as human shields in the cynical expectation that their deaths will generate public sympathy. The reasons may relate to postmodern ideology or the world's oldest hatred, anti-Semitism. Regardless, at this pivotal moment, when Israel urgently needs diplomatic support and military hardware, Canada's government shamefully counted the votes, lost its moral compass, and supported a parliamentary resolution that rewarded Hamas's deadly attack. How we miss Prime Minister Stephen Harper's principled foreign policy and his stalwart support of Israel. He understood that Israel is on the front lines of a battle against international terrorism on behalf of everyone who values freedom, pluralism, and democracy. I had the privilege of meeting Naftali Bennett during Stephen Harper's historic visit to Israel. His story, like that of his country, is an amazing tale of accomplishments, courage, and determination. Born in Haifa, he lived in San Francisco and Montreal. He served in special force units of the IDF, frequently saw combat, was a hugely successful software entrepreneur, and became the 13th Prime Minister of Israel and the 3rd alternative PM of Israel. You know, there's a lot we can emulate about Israel, but one thing we should avoid is proportional representation. That explains its incredibly complex electoral system in which Naftali Bennett was an active participant as head of the Jewish Home Party and the New Right Party, and cabinet minister of multiple portfolios. Joining Naftali for the fireside chat is our very own devoted conservative volunteer activist extraordinaire, Rick Ekstein. Few people in the movement can exceed Rick's energy and devotion to the cause. The former president and CEO of Western Forest Products, Rick now devotes himself to redevelopment projects and his passion for making Canada a better place to live. One of his many political focuses has been Thornhill, where he's supporting Melissa Landsman, the MP and deputy leader of the Conservative caucus. Rick recently returned from an informative and emotional mission to Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Naftali Bennett and Rick Ekstein.
Thank you. You got your mic? I think you're sitting on it. First of all, Joe, thank you very much for that kind introduction. And for those of you who may not remember, does anybody know who was the last Canadian finance minister to leave this country with a balanced budget? Joe reminds me of that every time I see him, so I'm actually quite surprised that he didn't say something. First of all, I'm thrilled to be here today to host such an important world guest. I've been coming to the Manning conferences pretty much since day one, and Adam Bullock and Ariella Kimmel and Zoe Lynn, I'm not sure where you are, but the three of you, thank you very much for putting together, again, such a wonderful event. You know, we heard, and I'll introduce this gentleman in a moment, but we heard 2 nights ago from Tony Abbott and from Boris Johnson that the fight in the Ukraine is the same as the fight in Israel, that it's a fight against good and bad, totalitarianism versus liberal democracy, light and day, whatever you wanted to call it. And they were very, very clear that the murderous attack on October 7th was not just an attack on Israel, but was an attack on Jews all over the world, and really an attack on the world itself. And just for those of you in the audience who might not know this, before World War II, there were 16 million Jews in the world. Today, 80 years later, there are 16 million Jews in the world. Well, it's an accomplishment, but it's also a little sad that after losing 6 million, that it's taken this long to get back to pre-war numbers. But let's get to know our guest a little bit. Mr. PM, first of all, Mr. Prime Minister, first of all, welcome. We're all shaped by where we come from, where we live. We heard a little bit from Joe. Where were your parents born? And just tell us a little bit about your youth and what shaped you to become who you are today.
Well, shalom, everyone. Shalom. And thank you for being friends of the Jewish state. I appreciate that. It matters. So I grew up in the city of Haifa, a beautiful city that's on a mountain that goes down to the Mediterranean Sea. Like all Israelis, grew up there and served in the military in Israel's top elite unit, commando unit. I became a platoon commander, later a company commander. Most of my service at the age of about 22, 23, 24 was commanding operations deep within enemy territory, usually in Lebanon and Hezbollah. And my unique expertise was identifying rocket launchers and destroying them. So I'm really good at it. If any of you ever needs the service, give me a call. And afterwards, like many Israelis, we start university late because of the military service, which, by the way, the military service in Israel is the best school for life possible. It builds your character, your perseverance. It makes you tough. We don't have lots of, the nonsense that other countries have with triggers and micro offenses or whatever. I don't know. All that stuff. We don't have any of that. When you're fighting Hezbollah and Hamas, you don't need a safe space. You need to... And long story short, I founded together with 3 friends a high-tech startup in the cyberspace selling software that to this day it protects you when you bank online. Our customers in Canada were Bank of Montreal, CIBC, Toronto Dominion. Does that still exist? Okay, yeah. So all of you, anyone who's got any of those accounts there, whenever you log in online, if we see that something's weird, like you're doing it from North Korea, we won't allow you in. We'll send you a text message or a bunch of things to authenticate that it's you. Anyway, sold the company, which is a wild change in your personal life. And the day after I left the acquiring company, the Second Lebanon War started. And I'm like, man, I was supposed to be in the Caribbean now with a cocktail and my wife and our kid. And instead, I commanded troops in the Second Lebanon War. And that was an inflection point. I was very disappointed with the way Israel was led. And I entered politics, spent a decade as Minister of Economy, Minister of Education, and finally Minister of Defense. And in 2021, I had the unique privilege, one might not call it a privilege, of running the most diverse government in Israel's history, religious and secular, right and left, bipartisan, and Jews, and for the first time an Arab-Israeli party that wants to be part of Israel. That's and it's considered a wildly successful government in terms of effectiveness, but ultimately the atmosphere was very polarized, and the coalition could not stay together. And today I'm a happy, Israeli citizen who's happy but worried about my country.
I feel like such an underachiever. Let's talk about October 7th. I've been there twice since then. I've been to the sites of the massacres. I've seen what's left. I saw the pictures. I've smelt what was left. Paint us a picture, and a real honest picture of what happened on October 7th, because I think while we read about it in the paper and we hear words like mass atrocities, tell us what that looked like.
So October 7th, there's actually 2 halves of the story. The first half of the story, and I have to be honest and direct, beyond the incredibly cruel things that Hamas did, I always look to ourselves, to what we should have done. Israel failed. We failed, and we have to be clear-eyed. We failed on our most basic mission, was that never again would Jews be massacred for hours and hours helplessly. And that's exactly what happened. We're very used to terror in Israel. A terror attack usually is winded up within 20 seconds to 5 minutes by people that are around the event. That's the cost of living in Israel. It's not that bad. I mean, but shame on us. There was a total meltdown of institutional Israel. Nothing was working well. And I'll tell you from my point of view, at 6:30 in the morning, sirens. I live in a suburb of Tel Aviv, a very nice community. Very rare to have sirens there. We went down, my wife and 4 kids and the dog, Lichi, down to the shelter. And when it was a Sabbath morning, a Saturday morning. I'm an observant Jew. When I came back to my room, I turned on my cell phone. And I began getting on my cell phone at about 7:15. I began getting messages from a kibbutz called Kfar Aza. just as way of background, how did they have my cell phone? How did they know my number? When I was a minister in the previous years, every time there was a round of conflict and rockets were shot at Israeli communities in the south, I had a habit. I'd go and sleep over at someone's house. Almost randomly, I'd bring one thing, a toothbrush, because I wanted to be with them under fire and feel what it is. And I always love handing out my cell phone to people. You know why, by the way? Because that way you get real information and quick. If you wait for the hierarchies of the bureaucracy of government, you get wrong information late. So that's what I always do. I bypass all the, anyway. So I get these messages, 7:20 in the morning, Bennett, help, there's terrorists outside. I'm from Kfar Aza, and I'm like shocked. And then another one, and I assume there's a massive attack on the kibbutz. I wasn't aware that it's a broad. So I called up the leadership of Israel, the military leadership, and said, get the heck down, get soldiers down there. And I assumed within minutes it would be solved, but then they placed me in a WhatsApp group of the kibbutz members, so I saw everything that's going on. Ultimately, I got in my car, drove to my former military reserve unit, and tried to speed up people going down. What happened is that at beginning 6:29 in the morning, roughly 3,000 terrorists armed with machine guns, with thank you, armed with rockets, missiles, hand grenades, breached the fence at about 50 different places and attacked roughly 55, 60 different communities at the same time, and butchered for hours and hours Israelis. What they did during those first hours, usually they came in, they took the cell phone of one of the victims, told him open up a Facebook Live session, and they filmed the whole thing live on Facebook, and Israelis all across Israel began seeing what's going on. There were several cases of parents who saw their kids being murdered, and then the parents murdered, all alive. Many cases of whole families being burnt alive. There were cases, over a dozen cases of rape, and many more cases of other atrocities. There were babies that were murdered. So that's the one half of the story. The other half of the story, which is really important for me that you know, is not of the failure of Israel, of institutional Israel, but of the incredible courage of the people of Israel, of Am Yisrael, the people of Israel. What happened, beginning at about 7 in the morning, when the first people across Israel realized what's going on, thousands of Israelis got in their cars, drove down without anyone telling them to do it, without having any family members down there, and began fighting to fend off, on their own initiative, fighting those terrorists to beat them off. And they came from all the way from the north, from Tel Aviv, from Jerusalem, from Haifa, from Beersheba. I spent the past few months talking, debriefing most of them to learn lessons. So everything I tell you is not through media, it's from personal experience. Let me give you one example, but it's very reflective of everyone. A guy called Elchanan, 42-year-old guy that lives near Jerusalem, a bit chubby. So he heard what's going on. He happened to hold a pistol. He called up his brother and their nephew. The nephew had a rifle because he was on leave from the army. Got in a car, drove down to one of the kibbutzim called Be'eri. For 16 hours straight, these three men knocked on a door of a family, evacuated them from their home in the kibbutz to the entrance of the kibbutz, which was already secure, under fire, went back to the next house, back and forth, 16 hours, these 3 young men saved 100 lives. So Elchanan at 9 a.m. on Sunday morning, the following morning, he took a bullet and died. He left 5 children behind. I visited his family at the Shiva visit. Later on, his cousin, fighting in Gaza, also fell and died. But this is what everyone was doing this. So there's dozens and dozens of these remarkable stories of people that no one told them to do it. You know, I was living in Manhattan on September 11th. I'm like the Forrest Gump of disasters. So I remember rivers of New York citizens walking quickly northward away from harm's way. And I remember the firefighters going south, and we all hurried them. That's only natural. People always run away from harm's way, civilians. But here, they saved the day. And by the way, I keep on saying young men and women, there's a reason. In many, many locations, young women save the day. And I have to admit, prior to October 7th, I felt that the military is moving too fast on putting women in all the combat units. I thought it was, too quickly. I was wrong. The women kicked ass. Let me tell you one story, if I may. One story, just a 21-year-old girl that she visited my house about a month ago. She told me the story. She was a tank commander, 40 kilometers away from the area, and commanded a tank crew. She wasn't an officer, an NCO. So she heard what's going on, got on the tank. They dashed towards the fence, breaking all the rules, and identified one of the breaches, a central breach in the fence, and saw about 150 terrorists trying to enter Israel, and they blocked it, killing many, many terrorists. They saved 6 communities in the south. They just held it for about 12 hours. So, and now I was in awe. Her story took about an hour to tell me because I like all the details. Where'd you go then? When we finished, she said, I feel a bit embarrassed, but can I ask a favor? And I said, anything you want. Could we do a short TikTok video together? But that's the point. You see, we had written off the younger generation as a TikTok generation, and it turns out that it's the toughest generation we've ever had. Now, why am I telling you all of this? I'm telling you it because, to wrap up the story, a total bureaucratic governmental failure, including the IDF, but citizens saved the day. Give you a data point. There were actually 4 massacres altogether in 3 kibbutzim and the party at Nova. There were another 50-plus battles. In all of them, usually 6 to 10 Israeli citizens, policemen and a bunch of soldiers, but about 6 to 10, managed to push off usually anywhere between 30 to 100 armed terrorists by raw courage and ingenuity, usually incurring 1 or 2 casualties. So many of these people lost their lives, but they prevented 50 other pogroms or massacres. And I'm telling you this for one reason, because there's sort of a cloud of depression. Israelis are now in trauma, and understandably, I think, and I accept that, but here's the bottom line. We have a nation with an amazing DNA. We knew that they're really smart and agile and startup nation and clever. That we all knew. What we didn't realize is how tough the younger generation is, how idealistic they are, how willing to sacrifice they are. And that combination is a killer combination, which gives me all the optimism that we're going to pull out of it and succeed.
And what the Prime Minister did not say is after all the trauma was over and the confusion was over, there were 1,400, give or take, dead people, some of them dismembered in such horrible ways that it took dental records and all kinds of other things before they were able to figure out who they were. The other thing that, especially if you look in the press these days, people forget about the hostages. There were 240 hostages taken. 100 have been returned. I've also heard some horrible stories about the treatment of the hostages. Also surprised that no one from the UN, the Red Cross, usually in situations like this, they go in and they get to visit them. So what can you tell us about the hostages, the ones that came back, the stories, and hypothesize on what the ones that are left are going through?
So I spoke to many hostages that returned. There's significant sexual abuse of the hostages, and unfortunately about quarter to a third of the hostages in their custody have been executed, just point blank. The Red Cross is not given any access, and obviously all the pressure is on Israel all day because we're the bad guys. Time is running out. We have to operate quickly.
Yeah, the hostages are, and just the other day, Israel asked Hamas to provide the names of the 40 hostages they might want to trade, and they couldn't come up with 40 names.
Right. We know, I don't want to elaborate on the intelligence sources, but we know it's hell. They're going through hell as we speak at this very moment in all kinds of rooms and across Gaza. The worst imaginable atrocities.
Before we get on to sort of the geopolitical and the global issues, there's still about 150,000 Israelis today who cannot go home. They either were living in the Gaza envelope or they were living in the north up near Lebanon. Rockets are still coming. They're traumatized. What does normal look like? Is there a normal? Are they going to be able to go home at some point?
So indeed, right now, tens of thousands of Israelis, both from the south of Israel and from the north of Israel, are displaced. They're living in temporary locations, usually hotels, getting education and all the service there, but it's incredibly unpleasant. It's also not good for the family structure and for work and for everything. What we need to do and what I would do, I would try and not fight two fronts in parallel. I would focus on wrapping up Gaza, and we'll talk about what that means. Then take care of the north, either with force or hopefully without, by having a credible military threat to push Hezbollah away from the border. Just as a way of understanding, we're in a war with Iran. It's Iran who's fighting us. Iran doesn't have a joint border with Israel. Iran is 1,000 kilometers east of Israel, but it's an octopus of terror that sends its arms through proxies to fight Israel on our borders. So Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza are Iranian proxies. Hezbollah in the north is an Iranian proxy. The Houthis in Yemen, for heaven's sakes, the Yemenites, what business do they have with us? We're writing it down. We're not going to forget. There'll be a time to close the open sheet here. So what I did as prime minister, I had a doctrine which I called the octopus, the Iranian octopus doctrine, which said that we should try and avoid skirmishes on our border and rather redirect our energy to weakening Iran, so ultimately this regime will collapse, and it will. And can I elaborate? I want to explain why this is not wishful thinking, but it's an inevitable thing, though it could happen in 3 months, 3 years, or 30 years. So it depends a lot on our actions. Iran, not only is it a radical ideology, but as a government, it's a bit similar to the Soviet Union of 1986, 87. It's a corrupt, very incompetent government, despised by almost all the Iranian people. Very soft, empire of lies, of internal lies, and hence it will collapse. The people hate it. But we can do a lot to accelerate that collapse. We could, and I'm not talking about, I'm talking short of a military attack, huge economic sanctions, cyber, overt, covert, empower the opposition there, much like the CIA did to help Lech Walesa and others in the countries of the Soviet bloc, and ultimately it will collapse. We need to do this quickly enough before they reach a bomb. So it's sort of a nuclear bomb, a race between the nuclear bomb and the collapse of the regime. I'm a bit frustrated with the West, who seems to be kissing up to Iran all the time, which is really stupid. There's an axis of North Korea, China, Iran, and Russia, and clearly that's a very sinister axis that we need to fight back, not by trying to give gifts and alleviate pressures, but quite the contrary. Go all in. And I think all governments, including the Canadian government, ought to adopt this. And it doesn't require war. Remember, America and the West never had to bomb the Soviet Union, but it did have to apply pressure and, most of all, moral clarity. President Reagan was very clear who's good and who's bad. There aren't two sides here. There's an evil side, and that's that axis that I described, and there's the good side, and that's us. So when you're very clear about it morally, then you can act, and we can win this.
Since you took us to the Gulf and that region, and I've traveled through there for 20, 30 years on business, and 30 years ago the Emiratis, the Bahrainis, Kuwaitis, everybody privately was saying how much they admire Israel, but they couldn't say that publicly. And then came the Abraham Accords, where countries were slowly able to say that publicly. In your opinion, is there a direct correlation between the attack, Iran's attack on Israel on October 7th, and the fact that the Saudis were getting this close to signing a peace treaty with Israel?
Well, that's very likely, but I don't know it as a fact. I don't have the evidence to prove that, but it's highly likely that we were in the process of building a regional alliance, not a regional NATO, short of that, but a regional alliance that would fend off radical Islam. The Sunnite, let's call it reasonable Arab countries in the region are terrified also by Iran and by Sunnite Muslim Brotherhood. So that we're flanked by two crazy ideologies, radical Shiite and radical Sunnites, and everyone wants to push them off. Look, we're going to move forward with it. Now, yes, it'll be postponed a bit, but it's in everyone's national interest that we do it. We will need to build these bridges. I had the privilege of being the first Israeli leader, prime minister, to visit the UAE on an official visit, and it's amazing. We're already, business is up, tourism is up. This is a short, well, it's a break in it for a moment. It's continuing, but it's slowing down, and we will continue.
So before we come to Canada, North America, and anti-Semitism, I just want to sort of finish with Gaza. You've gone 2/3, 3/4 of the way. You've gotten tremendous pressure and pushback from the Americans and others. How's this going to end in Gaza, in your opinion?
Well, you know, as a leader, sometimes you have complicated decisions, but sometimes the decisions aren't complicated. Perhaps effecting them, implementing them is difficult. This is an easy decision. We have to decimate Hamas. We don't really have a choice, and I want to just explain this, especially to empower you, because I have an ask. I'm going to ask of it now so you know. My ask is that I'll give you information, and you go out and fight for us, and stand up for Israel, and don't let those lies... And I want you to know it matters. I can't... exaggerate how much it matters when we see friends of Israel, Jews and non-Jews alike, that have moral clarity, that stand behind Israel, understanding that we're the only democracy in the Middle East, the only good force of good that's fighting off the bad. And yeah, we're fighting the West's war, because if we don't win, the West is next. And this will take 2 minutes to explain, and bear with me. Hamas devised and I would say perfected a new strategy, but they brought it to perfection. It's not that new. And it is, we go and massacre babies, rape women, murder families, burn them. Then we run back and hide within a civilian population, and we continue shooting the enemy from within. And we know that when the enemy comes back at us, we're going to cause the death of many civilians, and the world will blame Israel, and it'll stop. Now, what is that? What's being tested now, what's at stake now, is do we allow this strategy to work? Now, if we allow it to work, mark my words, you're going to see it everywhere. You're going to see it in Europe. You're going to see it in America, in the United States, in Canada. You're going to see it everywhere, because there'll be inspiration and imitation terror. We cannot allow this strategy to work. And by the way, if we allow it to work, many, many more Arab civilians will die, because this will be the way of fighting. So Israel has a task of, we cannot allow Hamas to survive. Everyone in the region and the world needs to know that if you go and massacre Israelis, you no longer exist. Now, we're being accused of genocide, of disproportional deaths. Why are there so many Palestinians dead? And of wanton killing of these civilians. I want to give you some facts. So just so you can... According to Hamas, 33,000 Gazans have died. They're lying, but let's go along with them for a moment. I think it's about 25,000, but let's stay at 33. Among them, we know that 14,000 are Hamas fighters and terrorists. So there's 14,000 terrorists and 19,000 civilians. That's a ratio of 1 to 1.3, 1.4 per militant, 1.4 civilians. That's the lowest ratio of collateral damage probably in the history of urban warfare. The average is 1 to 9, okay? In Afghanistan, Iraq, it was 1 to 4, 1 to 5, 1 to 6 but somehow, when Israel is bending over backward, we could have decimated all of Hamas in 5 days just by bombing the heck out of Gaza. But we didn't do it. We sent forces in. We've lost 600 boys because we're not just bombing everything. We've dropped tens of millions of leaflets, sent out perhaps 50 million text messages to vacate areas before we go in. Who does this? Yet Israel is being accused of genocide and all that. That is a double standard. That is, I wish it were only ignorance. Unfortunately, I think it's a combination of ignorance and anti-Semitism. I have to say it. Because somehow we're being held to something that's impossible. Also want to, with a show of hands, I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you have heard the words kanduz or baruz? All right, so there's almost 1,000 people here. One. So 1 in 1,000. That's 1/10%. Let me tell you what these places are. Kunduz, Afghanistan, was a hospital being run by a humanitarian organization called Doctors Without Borders. In 2015, America mistakenly bombed the hospital, killed 42 doctors, patients, but it was a mistake, and moved on. I assume they investigated it and learned the lessons and moved on because mistakes happen in war. Baruz, Syria, the coalition fighting ISIS in 2019 mistakenly bombed that town, killing 64 citizens, innocent citizens. None of you have heard of it. How many of you, show of hands, have heard of the World Central Kitchen and that Israel bombed and killed 7 people? It was a mistake. Mistakes happen. It was at night. The terrorists came in back and forth from that convoy, to my understanding. But suddenly, when 7 people die mistakenly, because that's what happens in war. War is a bad thing. Suddenly the whole world says we got to stop the war. That is a double standard. That is unacceptable.
Just to back you up, when I was there about a month ago, there's a lot of special forces from around the world who are coming and watching to see what happens. Special forces are a breed amongst themselves. They're like moths to candle. And I heard from all of them, from Americans and others, that one of the things they're watching is how few civilians are being killed. And I heard the same ratio that, in places like Fallujah, and when the Russians were carpet bombing in Syria, God knows what the ratio was, but that the ratio is between 1 to 1.4, 1.6. That's the numbers I was hearing from all these other independent nations. So I just wanted to let you know this is not just a bit of Israeli propaganda, but this is what I've heard from so many different people. But let's bring it to Canada. We've got people demonstrating in the streets, glorifying Hamas. We had union leaders on the day after saying Hamas has struck the first victory, or the first step towards victory. Hamas, let's just make it very clear, and you can help me. Hamas is committed to the destruction of Israel and the Jewish people. Am I saying that correctly?
That's correct. In Hamas's founding charter, which has never changed, they explicitly say that their goal is to kill the Jews and destroy Israel. That's in their charter. Imagine a constitution.
And yet, I think about this, if there was people in a white sheet walking up and down yelling, kill black people, the country would go insane. If they were killing gay people, it would be the same. And yet we've got, walking through our streets, people saying death to the Jews. They're using the code words of, from the river to the sea. They're being very, very blatant. They're wearing masks. They're threatening police officers. There was a clip of a masked man threatening to put a police officer 6 feet into the ground. There's been shootings, there's been arsons, there's been attacks on Jewish businesses. Are the people of Israel aware, first of all, of how bad it is to be a Jew in the diaspora right now? And what can you give us in terms of a little bit of comfort as to how maybe this will get better?
What we're seeing waves of lies and anti-Semitism, blatant anti-Semitism, which, as you say, if someone would ever have said, kill the LGBTs, everyone would be up in arms, rightfully so, kill the blacks. But when it's kill the Jews, that's okay. Kill Israelis, that's okay. Societies ultimately dissolve when they lack moral clarity, when they can't make a distinction between good and bad. And this is our time. This is the time of people with values, with character, to stand up, to fight back on the networks, social networks, talking to friends in your workplace, at universities, not only for Israel's sake, but for the sake of all of our future. Because, look, we are at the forefront, it's true. We are surrounded on our borders by the craziest terror organizations on earth and the most lethal. So the barbarians are at the gate, and we're fighting them off. We're serving the West by doing it. We never asked, we never will ask anyone to send people to fight for us. We'll do our fighting. What we do hope and expect is the minimum of have our back. Be with us. Be proud to be with the state of Israel. On a personal note, people don't always realize Israel's army is a citizen's army. It's not a professional army. It's a citizen's army, which means that every boy and girl at the age of 18 has compulsory service. And it's a merit-based military. So it doesn't matter what class you come from or what family. There's no shortcuts, and so it's beautiful. You have in one platoon you can have the son of Israel's most successful high-tech entrepreneur, and the son of a plumber, and the daughter of a teacher. And my oldest son, Jonathan, in 5 months is going to be joining a combat unit in IDF, and I'm proud. I'm terrified. Have to admit, it's scary, and we know that. But I know he's there to fight for such the most beautiful cause in the world, the cause of freedom, the cause of good. So, at minimum, we'd ask our friends, if you're not going to be with us, at least don't stop us, don't bother us, don't interfere. Unfortunately, not all friends are meeting that standard.
So we're just about out of time, and I know Ariel is going to yell at me in a moment. But since you just talked about the Army, in addition to it being equal from an economic point of view or social background point of view, you've got Muslims in the Army. You've got Druze, you've got Christians. I think some of the Muslims are actually quite senior. Maybe you could just, for 30 seconds, tell us what it's like to be in the Army in such a multicultural army.
Sure. Well, just a word about Israel, because we're every time our enemies, I don't call them rivals, our enemies say that we're an apartheid state. In Israel, there's 10 million citizens, 2 million of which are Arab. what they're called Arab Israelis. They enjoy full equal rights. We have Supreme Court justices that are Arab. We had ministers that are Arab, MKs that are Arab, you name it. Actually, the trajectory is fairly good. In the army, the army is open for all. We have Druze, which is a sect sort of a sect of Islam, but it broke off 1,000 years ago or so, serving along us. We have Muslims in the army, though not that many, because we don't. The Muslims in Israel, the Arabs, don't have to go to the army. Jews have to, so that's. But because it's a complicated issue, because we have Arabs that some of them are very loyal to Israel, but others are less. So we don't force Arabs to go into the military; they're exempt. So the Jews have more duties, but everyone enjoys the same rights. Yeah, I'm optimistic about the Israeli society, but again, we have to first win, unite, fix, reboot the military economy, and we're gonna pull out of this. And when these tens of thousands of young men and women come back from the war, they're going to be something. They're going to be imprinted with idealism and willingness to contribute to the state of Israel that has been lacking for 50 years. They're a bit like the finest generation in World War II that carried the amazing growth of the West for a whole generation. That's why I'm very optimistic of Israel.
It's a great note to end on. So, for what it's worth, I too am an optimist. Look at the friends we have in this room. We had standing ovations when Tony Abbott and Boris were talking about Israel. We got a warm welcome for you. And I guess
I have a friend that you may have heard his name, Stephen Harper. And I remember he always stuck to principle, even if it was going to cost him a bit of political price. That's a measure of character. And from here I send him thank you.
So I'm going to end. That's a good segue, because Stephen Harper was a man who knew right from wrong, had moral character, regardless of what that might cost him. And when I told a story at dinner last night, my mother's a survivor. She was a hidden child, hidden after her parents were swept off the streets by the Nazis. She was hidden by a Catholic priest and his family. And as you know, had that family been caught, all of them would have been killed. So there are people who will do the right thing. My aunt was saved by Oskar Schindler. Some of you may have seen the movie. There's another man who knew the difference between right and wrong and was prepared to do the right thing, like Stephen Harper. And I think you've got close to 1,000 people in this room today that are prepared to do the right thing, that will, as you suggested, go back, talk to your friends, talk to your church leaders, talk to your children, explain to them that this is not a one-sided story, as you may be reading in the newspaper. Explain to them that anti-Semitism is a
one-sided story. There's a terror side, and there's a peaceful.
The Prime Minister of Israel wants to interrupt you. It's okay.
No, I mean, how could there be two sides to someone who's massacring babies and women and men, and a nation of beauty and freedom? It's not equivalent. There's one side which is right and one side which is wrong.
And it does affect us. It does affect us. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you so much for being here today.